What if fixed versus mechanical has been doomed from the beginning because of the assumptions? One in particular that's not only off, but probably bass-ackwards. I'm going to break it down really quick because of our attention spans, and towards the end of the video, elaborate a little bit more for those of you who are interested. And don't worry, I'm going to make it so simple, even a Democrat could probably understand it.
Funny how even after a decade, this mechanical versus fixed blade debate has been going on.
A lot of you seen the video of Mel. Where'd I hit that deer? I hit that deer right in the shoulder blade. I had this much arrow sticking out. If I would have been using a mechanical, that deer would have been running around.
I say it without getting on people's toes, you know.
Get on people's toes. Say how it is.
There's a lot of ignorance. People ain't gonna back up and say they're wrong, and we're resistant to change. I mean, it's never dawned on a lot of people, if you won't change your mind, you can't change anything.
And when he comes out, I always make sure my deer are broadside for perfect pass-through. As long as you got a pass-through, I don't care what broadhead you use, it's going to do the job. Where the problem comes is when you're taking a hard angle shot, and a bad shot is a bad shot no matter what broadhead you use.
Hit him in the shoulder. 99 times out of 100, that works perfectly.
Lee made a very good point we'll get to later, but first let's talk about the assumption everyone makes that I'm claiming may be completely backwards, and that is that a fixed blade broadhead penetrates tough bone better than a mechanical. This diagram illustrates two methods that metal fails: tension and shear. I think we all know, and it is true, that an average fixed broadhead will stand up to tough bone better than a mechanical. The mechanical will be more likely to shear and break off a blade. But think about this. If that's the case, then that resistance of the broadhead to penetrate further is now removed, and any remaining momentum from that broadhead will allow it to continue to carry into the vitals of the deer. Therefore, I think it's likely that a mechanical broadhead would actually penetrate further. Now, granted, it would do so having one or two less blades than it entered, but I don't know about you, I'd much rather have a one or two blade remaining mechanical broadhead penetrating into the vitals of the deer than a fixed blade broadhead that's still standing together but not entering the vitals. I think everyone agrees, and it's fact, that a mechanical broadhead's wide diameter cutting is superior. And if one or two of those large blade enters the vitals, I'll take it. So let's talk about the video clips from Lee Lakosky and Don Higgins. To say that you hit a deer in the shoulder is a little like saying you hunt in the US. You got to narrow it down because it makes a big difference on specifically where you're talking. I think Lee had it about right. Granted, he said it in the spur of the moment, but I believe what he meant was that 99% of the time, you're going to not encounter significant bone enough to get decent penetration. Whereas Don Higgins basically painted the picture that anywhere in the shoulder you get no penetration, unless of course you're using a fixed broadhead according to him. Well, after harvesting the shoulder from a roadkill deer recently for this video and facing the wrath of my wife as the smell started to envelop our property, I decided to make this wood replica instead. It basically shows the structure of a deer's shoulder blade. Of course, they're not proportionally accurate. In the center of this wood structure, I put the scapular crest. It's much wider in relationship to the rest of the shoulder blade, but you get the point. If you were to enter the very top of that and it had to penetrate all of that, it would provide serious resistance to penetration of any arrow, field point, mechanical, or fixed. Move just a little bit to either side and you're in a darn near paper thin area that every broadhead can penetrate. At the very perimeter of it, there are some things that I believe are called processes and are a little bit thicker. But if you're shooting reasonable poundage, I don't believe you're going to have a problem. If you're like me and you like to shoot a lot and you're constantly changing around sights and doing things, you've probably launched a few arrows that didn't hit the target. I've hit lots of trees and saplings, sometimes penetrating not even deep enough for the field point to enter, other times completely passing through, usually stripping veins. Sometimes halfway through, and sometimes the sapling splits at the edge. Well, a green tree has similar properties to a growing and living bone in a deer. There are a few places on a deer, like the big bone that touches the scapula, perhaps that's the humerus, You can look it up. Perhaps that scapular crest, and it may not split, and it may indeed take all of the force of the arrow and completely stop it. But that's a very small percentage of the time, probably a 1% like Lee said. And if you consider any point of entry slightly off to the center of that scapular crest or a big bone, there's a good chance it's going to split the bone, still allowing some energy to continue pushing into the cavity of the deer. Consider it from a statistics standpoint. If Lee's right, then only 1% of the time is this penetration the big concern. The other 99% of the time, cutting diameter and sharpness is the bigger concern. But let's say it was closer to 95 versus 5%. Regardless, the math adds up. Shoot the sharpest, largest cutting diameter that flies the truest, which brings up a good point, because more important than all of these factors is shot placement. Let's face it, if you put a field point through the heart, you're going to kill it. Now granted, it's not going to die as quick, and you're not going to have a good blood trail, and that's really important. But I think you get the point. After taking a few shots at this replica scapula, and by the way, I had that bag target behind it, so it would have penetrated a whole lot further. And yes, it's fairly dry wood. You can see a couple different things. One going through the thickest part, what would be considered the scapular crest, got less penetration. Here's a good example of one entering a little thicker bone where the scapular crest transitions into the thin part of the scapula. This one's in a relatively thin spot. This one's somewhere in between. I could see perhaps one or two blades, likely just one blade of a mechanical shearing off the one that's on the side of the scapular crest on this arrow. Same with this arrow. Not that arrow. And that one, who knows? In my experience, they don't shear too easily, but I would agree that one or two could shear off as well. But I'll take penetration with one or two large diameter sharp, and sharp is a crucial factor, penetrating versus a fixed broadhead very likely lodging because it doesn't shear off and never entering the vitals. I've never seen a video talk about the potential that a mechanical actually penetrates further for the reasons I've outlined. If any of you have, please tell me in the comments. And if you'd like me to elaborate someday on how I sharpen or why I sharpen my mechanicals, yes, that's correct, or anything else related to this, please put it in the comments. You can find me at deernerds.com. And seriously, the time that I put into this video is nothing compared to a lot of guys on YouTube. I don't understand why anyone wouldn't like and subscribe even if you don't love it. If you subscribe, you don't get bombarded by things, and it's the difference between me, for example, doing more of this stuff than not. Years ago, 10 years ago, I had a really good YouTube channel. It did really well, had a couple with 1 million views, but I stopped because my son and I wound up spending more time arguing over editing and film footage